I never thought a Tuesday morning in May could change my entire life. But there I was standing in my own driveway in my pajamas and slippers, staring at the empty space where my Honda Civic should have been. The coffee mug in my hand trembled as I realized what had happened. "Mom, where's your car?" My teenage daughter Emma called from the front door, backpack slung over her shoulder, ready for me to drive her to school. I, I think it got towed. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. From our own driveway, Emma walked over, her sneakers crunching on the gravel. "That's impossible. You can't get towed from your own property." But the bright yellow notice taped to our mailbox told a different story. I ripped it off my hands, shaking as I read the official letterhead. Meadowbrook Townhomes Homeowners Association. Vehicle Removal Notice. Your vehicle has been removed due to violation of HOA Regulation 15.3, unauthorized parking in designated resident space. Vehicle license plate 7G2NRK was observed parked in driveway unit 247 without proper resident parking permit displayed. Towing fee $180. Daily storage fee $25. Contact Bronco Towing at... This is insane, I muttered, reading it twice. We've lived here for 3 years. This is our driveway, our assigned driveway. Emma peered over my shoulder. "What's this about a parking permit? We never needed a parking permit before." I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor Janet, who lived 2 units down. She'd been here since the development was built 8 years ago. "Janet, did you hear anything about new parking permits? My car just got towed from my own driveway." What? Janet's voice went up an octave. "Sarah, that's ridiculous. No one mentioned permits at the last meeting? Are you sure it was the HOA? The notice has their letterhead. Says I violated Regulation 15.3. Honey, I've read our regulations front to back. There is no 15.3 about parking permits. The parking section ends at 15.2, and that's just about not blocking the mailboxes." My stomach dropped. "So someone made this up. You need to call Brenda Morrison immediately. She's the HOA president this year, though God knows why we elected her. That woman's been looking for trouble since she moved in." I knew Brenda Morrison by sight, a thin woman in her early 60s with perfectly styled gray hair, who power walked through the neighborhood every morning at exactly 7:15, carrying a small notebook where she jotted down what she called community observations. Most of us called it being nosy. After dropping Emma off at school in Janet's car, I drove straight to the towing company. Bronco Towing was exactly what you'd expect. A chain-link lot filled with cars and trucks overseen by a guy named Pete, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Yeah, we got the Honda," Pete said, not looking up from his clipboard. "HOA called it in around midnight, said it was illegally parked." Midnight. The car was in my assigned driveway, where it's been parked every night for 3 years. Pete shrugged. "Look, lady, I just tow 'em where they tell me. You want your car back, it's $180 plus the storage fee. That's $205 total. I shouldn't have to pay anything. This is clearly a mistake. Take it up with the HOA. I got the work order right here." He showed me a standard towing authorization form with Meadowbrook Townhomes letterhead and what looked like Brenda Morrison's signature. I paid the $205 mostly because I needed my car to get to work, but I was furious. On the drive home, I called the HOA management company, Premier Property Management. "Premier Property, this is Denise." "Hi, this is Sarah Chen from Meadowbrook Townhomes Unit 247. My car was towed from my own driveway last night, and I need to understand what's happening with these new parking permits." "One moment, please," I could hear typing. "I'm not showing any new parking permit requirements for Meadowbrook. Let me transfer you to your community manager." After being on hold for 10 minutes, a woman named Linda picked up. "Mrs. Chen, I'm looking at your file now. There's no record of any parking violations or permit requirements for your community. Are you sure the towing was authorized by the HOA? I have the notice right here. It's on official letterhead signed by Brenda Morrison." "That's very strange. Mrs. Morrison doesn't have the authority to authorize towing on her own. That requires a board vote and written notice to residents at least 30 days in advance. Can you email me a copy of that notice?" I took photos of the notice and sent them immediately. Linda called me back within an hour. "Mrs. Chen, we have a problem. This notice references a regulation that doesn't exist, and the signature doesn't match Mrs. Morrison's signature we have on file. Also, the letterhead is slightly different from our official documents. Someone has created a fraudulent HOA notice." My hands went cold. "Are you saying someone impersonated the HOA to have my car towed?" "It appears that way. I'm going to need to investigate this immediately. In the meantime, I'd suggest filing a police report. That afternoon, I sat in the police station explaining the situation to Officer Martinez, a patient woman who took notes while I showed her the fake notice. This is definitely fraud, she said. Impersonating an organization to cause financial harm. The problem is proving who did it. Do you have any enemies in the neighborhood? Anyone who might want to cause you trouble? I thought about it. Not enemies exactly, but Brenda Morrison has been difficult lately. She's been complaining about all sorts of things around the neighborhood. What kind of things? Sorry. Last month, she tried to get our neighbor cited because his garden gnomes were supposedly inappropriate lawn ornaments. The month before that, she filed complaints about kids riding bikes on the sidewalk. She seems to think she's in charge of everything. Officer Martinez nodded. We see this sometimes in HOAs. Someone gets a little power and it goes to their head. But forging documents and authorizing unauthorized towing, that's criminal. I left the police station with a case number and a promise that they'd investigate. But I was still out $205 and increasingly angry about the whole situation. That evening, I was in my kitchen making dinner when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Brenda Morrison standing on my porch, arms crossed, wearing a stern expression. I opened the door but kept the security chain attached. What do you want, Brenda? I want to discuss your attitude problem, she said crisply. I understand you've been spreading lies about me around the neighborhood. Lies my car was towed from my own driveway using a fake HOA notice with your forged signature. I have no idea what you're talking about. But I do know that you've been parking incorrectly for weeks and it needed to be addressed. Parking incorrectly, it's my assigned space. You've been parking too close to the property line. It's blocking sight lines for safety. I stared at her through the crack in the door. Brenda, are you admitting you had my car towed? She lifted her chin. I'm saying that residents who can't follow simple rules need to face consequences. The police disagree. They've opened a fraud investigation. For the first time, Brenda's confident expression flickered. The police... Forging HOA documents is a crime, Brenda. So is authorizing unauthorized towing. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice was less steady now. We'll see about that. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Through the window, I watched Brenda stand on my porch for another minute before walking away, pulling out her phone. She was clearly rattled. The next morning, I woke up to find a new notice on my mailbox. This one was handwritten on plain paper. Your behavior is being monitored. Further violations will result in additional consequences. Neighborhood Watch. I took a photo and called Officer Martinez immediately. This looks like harassment now, she said. I'd like you to install a security camera if you can. Document everything. I spent my lunch break at Home Depot buying a doorbell camera system. It wasn't cheap, but I had a feeling I was going to need evidence of whatever Brenda was planning next. The camera was a good investment. Over the next 3 days, it captured Brenda walking by my house no fewer than 12 times, always carrying her notebook, sometimes stopping to take photos of my car, my lawn, and my front door. On Thursday evening, she brought reinforcements. The camera showed her standing on the sidewalk with 2 other people I recognized from the neighborhood, Ted Kramer from Unit 198 and Dolores Vega from Unit 203. They spent 20 minutes pointing at my house and talking in animated whispers. Friday morning brought another escalation. I woke up to find my recycling bin upended across my driveway, and my garden hose had been unwound and stretched across the sidewalk. The doorbell camera showed Brenda arriving at 5:47 a.m., looking around carefully before making her mess. That's vandalism, Officer Martinez said when I showed her the footage. And we've got her on camera. I think it's time we paid Mrs. Morrison a visit. But when we went to Brenda's unit at 189, she wasn't home. Her neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, came out to see what was happening. You looking for Brenda? She's been acting strange lately. Really strange. Strange how? I asked. Frank looked around nervously. She's been asking lots of questions about you, Sarah. Wanted to know your work schedule when you come and go if you have visitors. Yesterday, she asked if I thought your car was parked legally in your driveway. What did you tell her? I told her it was none of her business and none of mine either. But she got all huffy about it. Said people like you were destroying the community standards. Officer Martinez took notes. Did she say anything else? Yes, she did. She said she was building a case against you and that pretty soon you'd have to move somewhere that appreciated problem residents. I felt a chill. Building a case. What kind of case? Frank shrugged. She's been taking pictures of your house, your car, your trash bins. Even asked me if I'd sign a complaint about noise from your unit. I told her I never heard any noise. Thank you for telling us this, Mr. Kowalski, Frank Kowalski. And you're welcome. Brenda's always been a little intense, but this is getting out of hand. Most of us just want to live in peace. That weekend, I decided to go on the offensive. I spent Saturday morning walking around the neighborhood, knocking on doors and talking to neighbors about what was happening. The response surprised me. Nearly everyone had a Brenda Morrison story. Janet from Unit 211 told me Brenda had tried to get her fined for hanging laundry on her back patio because it was unsightly. Mike and Susan from Unit 233 said Brenda had filed a complaint because their 5-year-old son's tricycle was improperly stored on their front walkway. Carlos from Unit 256 showed me a certified letter Brenda had sent demanding he remove his small Mexican flag from his garden because it violated community appearance standards. When Carlos asked to see the actual regulation, Brenda told him to look it up himself. By Sunday evening, I had talked to 23 households. 18 of them had received some kind of complaint or demand from Brenda Morrison in the past 6 months. None of the complaints were based on actual HOA regulations. Most disturbing was what I learned from the Patel family in Unit 294. Brenda had been photographing their teenage daughter Priya coming and going from the house, claiming she needed to document unauthorized occupancy because Priya looked too old to be living with her parents. When Mr. Patel confronted Brenda, she accused him of being defensive and threatened to escalate the matter to proper authorities. She's stalking a 17-year-old girl, Mrs. Patel told me, clearly shaken. Taking pictures without permission. It's frightening. I realized this was bigger than just my car being towed. Brenda Morrison was conducting some kind of one-woman campaign of harassment against multiple families hiding behind fake authority and made-up rules. Monday morning, I called Linda at Premier Property Management and asked for an emergency board meeting. Based on what you're telling me, Mrs. Chen, I think that's absolutely necessary. I can schedule it for Thursday evening. Will that work? Perfect. And Linda, I'm going to ask several neighbors to attend and share their experiences. That's exactly what needs to happen. This has gone way beyond acceptable behavior. I spent the week preparing. I printed out every piece of documentation I had, photos of the fake towing notice, doorbell camera footage of Brenda's vandalism, the harassment note, and statements from neighbors about their experiences. Janet helped me organize everything into a clear presentation. She'd been a paralegal before retiring and knew how to present evidence effectively. You want to tell a story, she explained as we worked on Tuesday evening. Start with the towing because that's clearly illegal. Then show the pattern of harassment and fake authority. End with the impact on the community. Wednesday evening, Brenda made another mistake. The doorbell camera captured her trying to break into my mailbox with what looked like a screwdriver. She spent about 5 minutes working at the lock before giving up and walking away. That's attempted mail theft. Officer Martinez told me when I showed her the footage. A federal crime. I think we have enough evidence to make an arrest. Can you wait until after the HOA meeting Thursday? I want the community to see what she's been doing before she's arrested. They need to understand the full scope of this. Officer Martinez considered it. As long as you feel safe, I suppose one more day won't hurt. But if she escalates, any further call immediately. Thursday evening, the community center was packed. I'd expected maybe a dozen people, but nearly 40 residents showed up, including several I hadn't even talked to who had heard about the meeting through the neighborhood grapevine. Brenda arrived exactly at 7 o'clock carrying a large folder and wearing a navy blue blazer that made her look like she was attending a court hearing. She sat in the front row and glared at me while I set up the projector. Linda from Premier Property Management called the meeting to order and explained that we were addressing concerns about unauthorized actions taken in the HOA's name. I'd like to start by hearing from Mrs. Chen about the incident that brought this to our attention. I stood up, my hands surprisingly steady. On Tuesday, May 15, my car was towed from my assigned driveway based on a fake HOA notice. I showed the first slide, a photo of the notice. This notice references a regulation that doesn't exist and bears a forged signature. Brenda shot to her feet. That's a lie. I never signed anything. You're right, I said calmly. You never signed an official HOA document. You forged one. I clicked to the next slide showing the signature comparison Linda had prepared. The signature on the fake notice doesn't match your signature on file with the management company. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several people leaned forward to get a better look at the projection screen. I continued through my presentation, showing the doorbell camera footage of Brenda's vandalism, the harassment note, and Frank Kowalski's statement about her gathering information on residents. But this isn't just about my car being towed, I said, clicking to a new section. Mrs. Morrison has been conducting an unauthorized harassment campaign against multiple families in our community. One by one, neighbors stood up to share their experiences. Carlos talked about the Mexican flag complaint. The Patels described the photographing of their daughter. Mike and Susan explained the tricycle incident. With each story, I could see Brenda shrinking in her chair. The confident woman who had confronted me at my door was gone, replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. When Janet stood up to speak, the room went completely quiet. Everyone respected Janet's calm, measured way of speaking. I've lived in this community for 8 years, she said. I've seen us work together through budget issues, maintenance problems, and the occasional neighbor dispute. But what we've heard tonight isn't normal neighbor disputes. This is one person trying to control and intimidate multiple families using fake authority and made-up rules. She turned to face Brenda directly. Brenda, you've caused real harm to real people? Sarah had to pay over $200 because you committed fraud. The Patel's daughter is afraid to leave the house because you've been taking pictures of her. Carlos had to hire a translator to help him research regulations that don't even exist. Brenda finally spoke, her voice shaky but still defiant. Someone has to maintain standards in this community. If the official HOA won't enforce the rules, then residents have to take action. What rules? Ted Kramer called out from the back of the room. Name one actual rule that anyone here violated. Brenda looked around the room, clearly flustered. Well, there are community standards, expectations. That's not the same as rules, Linda interjected firmly. And you don't have the authority to create rules, issue citations, or authorize towing. Only the elected board can do those things, and only after proper notice and voting procedures. I am on the board, Brenda protested. No, you're not, Linda said, consulting her paperwork. You ran for the board last year and lost. You're an ordinary resident with no special authority whatsoever. The room was dead silent. I could see the shock on people's faces as they realized the extent of Brenda's deception. Carlos raised his hand. Are you saying she made us think she was on the board when she wasn't? That's exactly what she did, Linda confirmed. Mrs. Morrison has been impersonating an HOA official for at least 6 months. Brenda suddenly stood up, her face flushed. This is ridiculous. I don't have to listen to this. She grabbed her folder and started walking toward the exit. Actually, you do, said a voice from the doorway. Officer Martinez stepped into the room, followed by another police officer I didn't recognize. Brenda Morrison, you're under arrest for fraud, impersonating an organization authorizing unauthorized towing, vandalism, harassment, and attempted mail theft. The room erupted. People were talking all at once as the officers approached Brenda, who had frozen halfway to the door. This is harassment, she said, her voice rising to almost a shout. These people are ganging up on me because I tried to maintain property values. Ma'am, please put down the folder and turn around, Officer Martinez said calmly. As they handcuffed Brenda and read her rights, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the harassment was finally over, but sadness that it had come to this. Nobody wants to see a neighbor arrested. After the officers left with Brenda, the meeting continued. Linda explained the process for removing someone from any volunteer positions they might hold and ensuring they couldn't access HOA letterhead or documents. I also want to apologize on behalf of Premier Property Management, she said. We should have caught this earlier. We're implementing new procedures to prevent anyone from impersonating the HOA in the future. Ted Kramer raised his hand. What happens to the money people paid because of her fake citations? Anyone who paid money based on Mrs. Morrison's unauthorized actions should submit their receipts to us. The management company will reimburse everyone. Frank Kowalski spoke up from the middle of the room. I think we owe Sarah an apology too. She's the one who had the courage to investigate this and bring it to light. If she hadn't fought back, Brenda would still be harassing all of us. The room broke into spontaneous applause. I felt my face getting red, but also felt proud that I'd stood up for myself and, as it turned out, for the whole community. As people started leaving, several neighbors came over to thank me personally. Mrs. Patel hugged me and said her daughter Priya finally felt safe coming and going from the house. Carlos shook my hand and told me he was going to put his Mexican flag back up in his garden. You know what the crazy thing is, Mike said as he and Susan were packing up their papers. Our community is actually really nice when people aren't being harassed and intimidated. Susan nodded. Maybe now we can get back to just being neighbors. The aftermath took several weeks to fully resolve. Brenda was released on bail but had to stay away from the Meadowbrook Townhomes community as a condition of her release. The management company reimbursed my $205 towing fee, plus additional money for the security camera I'd had to install. More importantly, the fake citations and complaints Brenda had issued were all voided. Carlos put up a beautiful garden display with both American and Mexican flags. The Patels invited several families over for a community barbecue. The kids started riding bikes on the sidewalk again without looking over their shoulders. About a month later, I ran into Janet while checking my mail. She was reading a letter and grinning. "Good news," I asked. "The best. Brenda Morrison just pled guilty to all charges. Part of her plea agreement is that she has to pay restitution to everyone she harassed, plus community service." "What kind of community service?" Sherman. "She has to spend 60 hours helping elderly residents with yard work and home maintenance. Supervised, of course." I had to smile at the irony. "So she'll finally be doing something actually helpful for the community." "Exactly, and there's more good news. The board voted to install a community garden in the empty lot behind the mailboxes. Carlos is going to help design it." As summer progressed, our neighborhood really did return to normal. Better than normal, actually. The experience of being harassed by Brenda had brought us together in a way that wouldn't have happened otherwise. We looked out for each other, more communicated better, and had a deeper appreciation for what it meant to be good neighbors. I kept the doorbell camera partly for security, but mostly because I'd grown to like being able to see who was at the door without getting up. It captured lots of pleasant moments. Delivery drivers being friendly kids playing in the street, neighbors chatting over garden fences. One evening in late July, the camera caught something that made me smile. Ted Kramer and Frank Kowalski were standing on the sidewalk in front of my house, looking at my car parked in my driveway. "Looks like she's parked perfectly," Ted said. "Yep," Frank replied, "right where it belongs." They walked on, but not before Frank waved at the camera. I think he knew I was watching. The legal case wrapped up in August. Brenda Morrison received 2 years probation, had to pay nearly $3,000 in restitution to various residents, and was banned from serving in any HOA capacity for 5 years. The judge said her actions represented a serious abuse of perceived authority and warned that communities depend on trust and cooperation to function. I attended the sentencing hearing not out of anger, but because I wanted closure. Brenda looked smaller somehow, less imposing than she had during those weeks of harassment. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood up slowly. "I want to apologize to the residents of Meadowbrook Townhomes," she said, her voice barely audible. "I thought I was helping maintain community standards, but I realize now that I was wrong. I overstepped my authority and caused harm to people who were just trying to live in peace." She glanced over at me. "Mrs. Chen, I'm especially sorry for what I put you through. You were right to fight back, and I hope the community can forgive me." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it seemed genuine. I nodded at her, and she gave me a small, sad smile in return. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I reflected on how much had changed since that Tuesday morning in May when I'd found my driveway empty. I'd learned that standing up to bullies, even bullies who think they have official authority, is worth the effort. I'd learned that most people are reasonable and fair when they have all the facts. And I'd learned that a strong community is built on mutual respect, not fear and intimidation. The experience also taught me about the importance of documentation. Without the doorbell camera footage, the neighbor statements, and the careful record keeping, it would have been much harder to prove what had really been happening. Evidence matters, especially when dealing with people who abuse perceived authority. Most importantly, I learned that fighting back doesn't just protect you, it protects your whole community. Every person who shared their Brenda Morrison story at that Thursday night meeting had been suffering in silence, thinking they were the only ones being harassed. By investigating and exposing what was really happening, we created space for everyone to speak up and seek justice. Our neighborhood is genuinely friendly now. People wave when they see each other, kids play outside without worry, and the community garden Carlos designed has become a gathering place where residents share vegetables and stories. The HOA functions the way it's supposed to, handling legitimate maintenance and administrative issues without micromanaging how people live their daily lives. I still park in the same spot in my driveway every night. Sometimes I look out the window and remember that empty space from that morning in May, and I'm grateful for the chain of events that followed. Not because I enjoyed being harassed or going through legal proceedings, but because standing up for myself and my neighbors created lasting positive change. Last week, a new family moved into Brenda Morrison's old unit. The Johnsons have two young kids and a friendly golden retriever. When I introduced myself and welcomed them to the neighborhood, Mrs. Johnson mentioned that they'd been worried about HOA restrictions after some bad experiences in their previous community. Don't worry about that here, I told her. We keep an eye out for each other, but we let people live their lives. As long as you're not hurting anyone, you'll fit right in. She smiled and thanked me, then asked about the community garden. I walked her over and introduced her to Carlos, who immediately offered to help her family claim a plot for next season. As I watched them chatting about tomatoes and peppers, I thought about how different this scene was from the anxiety and fear that had dominated our community during Brenda's reign of harassment. This was what neighborhood life should be. People helping each other, sharing common spaces, and building genuine relationships based on mutual respect. The experience taught me that HOA disputes don't have to end badly if people approach them with good faith and accurate information. The real problem isn't homeowner associations themselves. It's when individuals abuse the system to harass and control others. When that happens, the only solution is for the community to come together and demand accountability. I hope our story encourages other people who might be dealing with HOA harassment or abuse of authority to document everything, seek help from neighbors, and not give up when facing what seems like official power, but is actually just one person's attempt to control others. Standing up for yourself in your own neighborhood shouldn't be necessary, but when it is necessary, it's worth doing. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Sometimes the best way to protect your peace at home is to fight for it. This is a dramatized story inspired by common HOA disputes, not legal advice.